Good morrow to you, fair wanderer of the interwebs, and welcome to today's SitRep, the situation report. What is going on in the world? This is where I pour over stories that I've looked at the last couple of days that I find interesting. It's not always the biggest news. It's definitely not the mainstream media news. It's just things that I find interesting. And I find them interesting usually from the perspective of being a preparedness-minded person. So if you're into that, then you're in the right spot. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. Appreciate it. Hopefully there's something worthwhile for you here. What we're basically trying to do here is look at stuff that I see in the news and go, which way is the wind blowing? That's essentially how I wrap this up. Which way is the wind blowing at the moment? What do we have to do to best prepare ourselves? So welcome to you all, whether you're watching on Instagram, good afternoon to you, Advisor20219, whether you're watching on the YouTubes or listening to the audio version on your favorite podcast listening device. Bit of a shout out to some people I just saw join in. Captain Quest, g'day mate. Fantastic little TV show, which I'm blanking on the name of right now. Please remind me what it is, but star of a TV show at the moment. Fascinating TV show on sailing the high seas. Highly recommend it to anyone. Ryan Barraclough, who is gallivanting around the world at the moment. G'day, mate. Blue Water Safari. Thank you very much, Captain Quest. Really appreciate it for giving me the reminder there. Check it out, Blue Water Safari. Awesome, awesome show. Cool stuff. And you'll get to see Captain Quest, who's, I'm just going to be honest, he's a sexy human being. So check him out on that. Norman Lacey says hello from Atlanta. Atlanta? I'm assuming there's a typo, unless Atlanta is a place that I haven't heard of, but I'm going to assume you mean Atlanta, Georgia. Yes, SBS for those Aussies there who want to check out Blue Water Safari, and I believe you can still get it on the online SBS version. Ryan Barraclough, bloody good to see you, noggin, mate. Wow. Appreciate it. I like to put my noggin out there every now and then so people can see it. And then from this noggin spews all the doom and gloom that's happening in the world. No, as I always say, the purpose of this is not doom and gloom. It is to better inform ourselves. So if you're looking at this sort of stuff and you're going like, oh, fretting, the world is a horrible place, you're probably not in the right headspace to be tackling this kind of content. And I would suggest, hey, maybe go and chill out and watch some Netflix or something like that first. This is all about just getting yourself prepared. So that's one of the things that I try and get across to people is I'm not trying to incite fear in people. I'm trying to incite confidence, or at least light a fire under people that you're going to go out and get prepared, more prepared for the future. And I'm not saying that the world is going to fall apart. I think my personal opinion is that the world is going to become slightly harder for some of us, extremely harder for others of us, depending on where you are in the world and what your situation is now. But I think we're going into a harder period, and it behooves us to prepare ourselves for that. But even if it doesn't, even if everything is great and the stock market still continues going up and people still continue making money hand over fist, and we continue to put petrochemicals and fossil fuels into our vehicles and drive around, if all that continues happening, then hopefully the message I get across is to live a life that's more connected to the land and is more self-reliant. And I don't think that's going to be a bad thing to do, regardless of what happens in the future. If things go to shit and you're more self-reliant, that's a good thing. If things don't go to shit and you're more self-reliant, I still think that's a good thing. So, hey, Savage the Wild. Hey, bub, how's it going? I hope things are going all right over there in the US of A. I don't have a lot of stories about this, but obviously riots going on in the US of A at the moment, with the that footage that got released of those 5 police officers who very unfortunately beat someone to death, and that's incited a lot of riots that are going on there at the moment. I saw video footage of riots in LA, in New York, in Washington, and one other place. Was it Atlanta? Maybe you can tell me, Norman Lacey. Was it Atlanta that there were riots going on? But anyway, major cities in the US. This is the sort of stuff that I've been talking about for a while now, about the increase in civil disorder that I think we're going to see in the future. I mean, right now, we're seeing it already. You can't argue that we're already seeing increased violence within our society, increased propensity for things like civil unrest, like riots and things like that. So if you do live in and around a city, this is something that you should really be paying attention to. It doesn't matter what the city is. Even Australian cities, I would say, like, this is the sort of stuff that you really want to prepare for. And there are a number of ways you can prepare for riots. My number one recommendation is always get out of the cities. Don't live in a city. Well, my number one recommendation for whatever I'm teaching, whether it be self-defense, whether it be general security principles, is what you want to do is avoid. Avoidance is your first line, or should be your first line of defense, rather than how do I fight my way out of an issue? How do I not be there in the first place? The best way to win a fight, no be there, Daniel-san, as I like to teach. Mr. Miyagi taught me that. Best way to avoid a punch is to no be there, Daniel-san. Don't be in the fight. Don't be involved in the riot, the situation in the first place. So if we can predict these things happening, avoid them altogether. Norman Lacey corrects and says, yes, Atlanta, and has a cat in his lap, so that's why I won't let him type. Cats, just, evil little creatures. All right, what's going on in the world? Let's flick through. I've got a whole bunch of stories, so I'm going to skip over a few things here. Let's try and tie in a little bit about, to start off with, what's going on in the war situation. So we got war, obviously, in Ukraine. We've got tanks getting sent. So Germany has capitulated to the public pressure, the governmental pressure from the other NATO nations, and said, yes, finally, we will put Leopard tanks into the battlefield. So they're sending, I think, 10 or 16. A bunch of other NATO nations are sending theirs over, and the US, not to be outdone, has said, yes, we're going to push M1 Abrams over there. 30, I think they might have said that they're putting over there. And of course, then bang, the war is won. No, as soon as they announced that, Zelensky came out and said, also F-16 fighters. We need thank you very much for the tanks. Tanks a lot. F-16 fighters now. Also, long-range missile systems. So keep pushing. And in case you can't see how this is happening, give an inch, take a mile. Like, every time something is given into Ukraine, more is going to be requested of it, because this is not... I'm not like throwing shade on Ukraine necessarily, or Zelensky necessarily there. That's beside the point. What I'm saying here is that if you read the tea leaves of what's happening here and look what way the wind's blowing, it is an extended, protracted war that is going to happen here, that is already happening, we're in the midst of, and the pieces have already fallen into place for this to be a much, much longer conflict. So don't expect this to go away. Don't expect it to disappear overnight and be resolved. Don't expect Russia to be defeated in the next weeks or months. This is going to be a very long affair. And that is my estimation of it, based on the resources that NATO and allies are putting into this war. If they felt like it was going to be over soon, then they would be already starting to backpedal, already starting to pull out of it. So a couple of things that we can get out of that. First thing, food. Food crisis is going to extend. That is a guarantee at this point. And I said this months and months ago, if somehow the war just wrapped up overnight, I think I was talking about this maybe mid-year, so July, August, somewhere around there. If it wrapped up overnight, we would still see at the absolute fastest, if there was a huge amount of international cooperation, 6 months lag, but more like 18 months, but more like 3 years lag. That's the effect that this war has already had on the food system. So all that corn, all that wheat, all that fertilizer, all that food product that's going to come out of that area there, which is large parts of the world, that's their breadbasket, Africa especially, that's already pushed off the table. What we're looking at now is probably 5 years before that's all up and running and going again. If this war keeps going on, that's extending it. And it's not extending it one-to-one. It's not like, oh, yep, every month it's going to be a month further out. every month of this war, it is 6 to 12 months that's added onto this. So, we're staring down the barrel of a food crisis in this part of the world that could, it's not beyond the stretch of imagination to believe that this could be going out a decade, even at this point. But as it continues on, I think it will last out to a decade. We'll have severe impacts on our food system for a decade plus. And I say our as in the world. Obviously, the mitigating circumstance here is Australia is a net exporter of food and wheat, especially if you're into that stuff. So Australia, New Zealand, by association, we are sitting in a much better situation. USA, you guys too, net exporter of food, net exporter of corn, net exporter of wheat. So countries like Australia, countries like the US are going to fare a lot better. The massive effect this will have will be Europe. It'll be hard to get. The major effect will be Africa, where it won't get it. Anything that's going out and heading towards Africa at the moment, when push comes to shove, European countries, I can guarantee it because they've already done this with other resources. When push comes to shove and they go, oh shit, it's feeding us or Africans, we'll take it. And we've got more money, so we will take it. The more money that gets thrown around, that's where that wheat's going to go. So that's what's going to happen. So the effect on Europe will be severe increases in food prices over the next coming years. The effect on Africa will be hundreds of thousands, if not hundreds of millions of people starving to death. Anyway, I wasn't even going to talk about that. I don't know why I went on this rant, but that's what we're looking at the moment. So there's a number of things that are going around this. This isn't just tanks. It's not just them asking for F-16 fighter jets or long-range missiles. We're seeing some other indicators here. So this one was sent to me by my main source on Instagram. We're looking at the sales and the stock prices of certain industries, and especially like defense industry and certain companies within them. So just to give you a look at this, sales at General Dynamics Combat Systems Unit, which makes the Abrams tanks and other land warfare systems, rose 15.5% to $2.18 billion in the quarter that ended last quarter. So that was December 31. So you can imagine that now that this announcement has been made, there's going to be another severe increase in that. And like always, I try and keep my eye on companies like this, because where money goes, that's what's actually happening. There can be a lot of confusing news out there, but usually when you're seeing money flow into certain areas, it can give you a really good indication, because these people are pushing this type of money around. They're not doing it flippantly a lot of the time. They're doing it calculatedly. Is that a word? It is now, calculatedly. And they are doing it for profit. They're not throwing money down the drain or anything. They know what they're about here. All right. What other indicators do we have here? There's a few other stories in this space, if I can find them. I didn't put things in order. F-16s. Denmark is planning for compulsory military conscription for women. So it's looking at boosting the size of its armed forces. This has been a really interesting thing for me to kind of watch and track. And if you're looking at this, if you're paying attention, Western military forces are in decline. And there are a number of reasons for that. Over just the period where I have been out of the military, which, what we're looking at 10 plus years now that I've been out, I've seen a constant degradation of both the intake standards. So, for example, if you admitted to ever having taken drugs at any point in your life, when I joined the army, they would say no. They would just say, no, you cannot get in. So that didn't apply to me. I was a nerd growing up, so I never touched drugs or anything like that. But, there were some people that I knew who had, and obviously they had to just lie about it. And they said, no, we never, never did that. But after I got out, they said, yeah, if you've done drugs before, that's fine. We don't care. They actually had certain points where if you'd had any sort of like legal offense or anything like that, you'd been maybe not jailed, but you had something on your record, no way you're getting in. But they opened that up as well. They then started to drop the physical standards as well. So the standards now are a lot lower than when I joined, and it wasn't particularly high when I joined. It was like 20 push-ups. I want to say like 50 or 60 sit-ups or something like that. There was a beat test. That was it. It wasn't like crazy hard or anything like that, but they've dropped it from that. It's lower than it is now. And then the standards to actually stay in, the standards to get into certain areas of the military are also severely brought down now. So what we see is a weakening. But the problem was why they're doing that is because they couldn't meet their quotas. They want to get people into the military. There wasn't the pool of people to get it from. Why isn't there the pool of people? Well, number of reasons probably for that. But first, as a health indicator, that's a pretty good indicator for general public health. It's showing you that the health of the general public is not at a standard where they can say, yep, just come on in, because they're not getting those people to come in. Also, I think the will or the I don't know what you'd call it, the want to go into any sort of military service it's just not there within the general public nowadays, or that percentage of people that are either dumb enough or crazy enough to actually want to join up to the military. That percentage is getting a lot smaller. I'm kind of skirting around the point here. Soft. Our society's got soft. That's the way I see it. And I'm not saying I don't really care about society as a whole. Society as a whole can get soft, but there's always a cadre, a percentage of a society that has some sort of drive like that has some sort of will to do these sorts of things. But on the whole, our society is getting soft, so there's less of those sort of people to draw from. Anyway, so they're going to have to open it up to other things. Conscription for women here in a Nordic country. This is an indicator, firstly, that exactly what I'm just talking about here, that they're struggling to find people to get in there. And at the end of the day, they're just like, hey, look, we just need bums on seats now. We don't care who we're getting in, really. Let's get people in here. Let's get more people in here. There's also been, this also goes into, gender equality issues and things like that. And you can argue both ways on this. There's jobs, having been through the military, I can tell you there's a job for everyone in the military. Doesn't matter who you are or what your capabilities are. There's a job for you in the military as far as I'm concerned. It might not be special forces, all right? You might not make those lofty heights, but there are blanket folders. There are people who count beans and bullets. There are people who drive trucks. There are people who patch people up. There are people who make plans. There are people who read newspapers. There's all sorts of stuff that's going on in the military. The people who play instruments. In fact, they're the highest paid people in the military, oddly enough. But there's a job for everyone. So, I'm all for it. But, when we start to see this become the driving factor, I think this leads to a pretty bad place. And I've also got issues personally with the gender equality moving into the battle space in particular. That's not necessarily this. And if I can just sort of slightly clarify that too, what I'm talking about there is I view females as much more valuable for a human evolutionary standpoint than men are. Men are valuable. Women are much more valuable because men can't reproduce by themselves. That's sort of some baseline arithmetic there on it, but that's essentially what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this sort of stuff. So what's the other part of this that I'm actually seeing here? What is this indicating? This is more signs that Europe is gearing up. NATO nations are gearing up towards an extended war that's coming. Again, this is just me trying to look at it and going, okay, what are they doing rather than what are they saying? They want more people in the military. Yep. Okay, they're moving towards this. That's what I'm seeing there. What else have we got? There's so much going on at the moment. All right. The World Health Organization has published a list of medicines for nations to stockpile. Why? Why would we want to do that? The health body publishes a list of medicines for nations to stockpile in case of radiation or nuclear emergency. This coming off the back of the EU warning that Russia is at war with the West. So again, the war drums have been beaten really, really hard in this past week, and they're really trumping up this this talk that Russia is the bad guy, obviously, but they're in a war. And like I said, I think NATO has crossed the line now. I said this probably on the last SitRep or the one before. NATO has crossed the line, and they are in a state of warfare with Russia now. Russia versus the West, Russia versus NATO. So who issued guidance on how to survive a nuclear catastrophe this couple of days ago? You know, we're seeing the threat of nuclear war heightened at this point. Obviously, in other news, the doomsday clock clicked up to 90 seconds to midnight. If you're into that sort of stuff, for those who don't know what the doomsday clock is, a bunch of scientists got together, I think in the 50s, you know, not too long after inventing the nuclear bomb, and said, hey, we need some sort of really simple way of indicating to people how close we are to utter catastrophe as a species, because we have the ability now. Once we'd invented that nuclear bomb, we've got the ability to wipe off all human life from the earth. So we need a way to indicate that to people. So they invented this clock, and it was basically saying if it strikes midnight, that's it. That's catastrophe. That's apocalypse. It's all done. And it's been up and down. It's been set at different time points throughout the past, what are we talking now, 70 years. 90s, it was like at 3 minutes or something, which is I think the furthest out it's been. It got updated to 100 seconds to midnight 2 years ago, and they just released that it's 90 seconds to midnight now. So this is the closest it's ever been. This is the most dire point that we have ever been as human beings, according to the clock. Charlie Core says the fear porn clock. Exactly. I don't want to rag it off totally. It does have some good points, and it is kind of interesting. And it's not like they're just randomly throwing up stuff. They do a fair bit of analysis when they're making this decision. I think it's just a weird thing to then take a myriad of information and just give it this one little digestible, screenshot bite to people. It's like 90 seconds, you're about to die. I think the pitch is not quite resolute enough on that one. But if you actually go and read their reports, they do go into a lot of different factors, which are interesting. And I kind of recommend people do go and have a look at those reports that they put out. Again, I don't think it's anything to hang your hat on and live your life by, but it's just another data point that's interesting to look at. So yeah, who's saying, hey, nations, you better start stockpiling medicines? What does that tell us as preppers? What should we be doing? If they're telling nations to stockpile medications, maybe we should be doing it as well. So that's certainly something that I'm looking at, going, yeah, maybe I can bolster some of the things that I've got at the moment. Medications obviously have an expiration date on them as well, so making sure you're cycling through those things. A 4-star general from the US of A says he believes the United States will be at war with China in 2025 and orders the Air Force to start preparing. So this is one of the highest level military officials in the US, and he's come out and said to the military commanders that he's confident that they're going to be at war with China in 2 years' time. That's pretty drastic. If you actually ignore the mainstream media who says we're going to be at war with them tomorrow, but if you actually look at what a lot of the military minds are saying, they're saying 5-10 years, probably 10, maybe as close as 5. So does someone come out and go 2 years' time we're going to be at war? That's a pretty big deal. But I'd also like to see what this General Mike Minahan. I would love to go and look at what investments he has into what defense companies, because defense companies are making bank right now, and it's on the back of news like this. So I would love to see if there's any sort of correlation there going on. Charlie Core says a Kiwi friend's cousin is in the NZ Army, sniper. He told her they've started training for war with China. I certainly hope so. Should have been doing that a little while ago. I mean, in less overt ways, the US Army has been, the Australian Army has been doing that for a number of years. In more overt ways, at least the last couple of years, they've been more overtly training with their exercises. You see what they're doing with their planning exercises and things like that, with the way they shape their enemy picture. It's definitely built around this. It is something that Australia and New Zealand need to be focused on, specifically for us, I think, now coming into where we're going. US to increase artillery ammunition production by 500% for the Ukraine. So again, more news coming out that these companies are going to be making bank very soon. And this was an interesting one. I found this one sort of just after that story. So US, and I'll just repeat that story, US to increase artillery ammunition by 500%. It's a pretty big increase. Followed by study finds US would run out of long-range munitions in 1 week in a Chinese hot war. So that meaning if the US and China were to actually go to war where they were pew-pewing back and forth, actually shooting bullets, well, this particular report, which comes out of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, has said that the US is not adequately prepared for a protracted conventional war, that they would essentially run out of long-range munitions within a week. Not good. That's just long-range munitions, so then they'd have to get closer, I guess. But yeah, that's in case what they're looking at there is a hot war with China in and around the Taiwan Strait. More news that if you're an investor, I keep saying this, if you want to play the stock markets right now, I think the good money, the smart money at least, not the good money, the smart money would be into defense industries, into these larger companies, Raytheon, Lockheed, what's the other big one? Northrop Grumman, all these sorts of companies. They're going to be making a lot of money. All right, I've skipped over a lot here, but I'm going to stay them skipped today because I just got way too much. I haven't done one in quite a few days, been busy, so it's been a couple of days. Australia sees heart attacks increase by 17% in 2022. What could have caused that? Well, the experts blame the pandemic. They said it's the pandemic's fault. What about the pandemic? There's a number of issues going on there, but if you get that nasty little thing, it increases your chance of having a heart attack and a stroke, apparently, amongst other things like eggs. Yeah, couldn't be. I don't think they've bothered purposefully going into if there's differentiation between if people might have been or not to whether they're having heart attacks. They just said, no, more people are having heart attacks. It's pretty plain to see, though. Really interesting statistics coming out from this. Side note, not related at all, Moderna announces the development of an mRNA shot to stop heart attacks. Huh. Just coincidence, I guess. But it's like, hey, a lot of people are having heart attacks. We're going to create a shot for that. And on the back of that, if I can find this story, more vaccine doses correlated to greater increases in mortality. So I kind of like statistics. I like statistics raw, and I like statistical analysis of stuff. I don't, again, it's not the be all and end all, and they can be used in different ways to show you different things. Sometimes opposite sides of the argument with the same statistics can be used depending on how you frame it. But this one is interesting. So this is certainly one that I've been looking at over the pandemic. I've been looking at statistics quite a bit, and I find them very interesting and very telling. And I find it also interesting and telling that other people ignore them when it's convenient for them. But this one coming out from an interview with Josh Sterling, who says the more doses on average you have in a region within the United States, the bigger increase in mortality that region has had in 2022 compared to 2021. So this guy, Josh Sterling, is an insurance research analysis. That's probably the big thing that twigs to me. I do pay attention to insurance research. Why? Because like I said at the start, money. Insurance companies are worried about money. That's all they're worried about. That's their entire thing. It's this imaginary game. They're basically gambling. So you come in and say, I'm gambling that I'm going to break my leg at some stage. So I'm going to give you money. And when I do break my leg, you're going to give me a bunch of money back. Or I'm going to gamble against, the fact that I'm not going to crash my car, meaning that I am going to crash my car. And when I do, I'll get money back. It's one of the reasons I hate insurance, because you're basically paying money for the likelihood of you having something bad happen to you. So just from that standpoint, I don't really like insurance. But insurance companies are all about making money. So they want to know where these things are going to occur, because they don't want to pay out. They want people to give them the money, but they don't want to pay out. So they're looking at things like mortality. They're looking at things like injuries. They're looking at things like people getting sick, having car crashes, falling off ladders, all that sort of stuff. And they're breaking it all down. If you look at the statistics from insurance companies, it is fascinating, because quite often they're just looking for the truth. They don't really care about what the ESG agenda is that's going on. They care about the money. And I've talked to several insurance researchers about this, or people who work in the insurance industry, and they'll say stuff like, yeah, insurance costs more for somebody who is like this. And I'm like, oh, that sounds sexist. And they're like, no, it's just the statistics. If you are of this gender, you are more likely to be in a car accident. Oh, okay. And also this. I'm like, oh, that sounds very racist. And they're like, nope. Again, the statistics tell us if you are from this particular genetic region, then you're more likely to be in a car accident. And there's also this. I'm like, that sounds very ageist. And they're like, no, if you are over this age, again, statistically, much more likely to be in a car accident. So that's why I like these sorts of insurance statistics. And this one here is quite telling. I think that this mortality rate that we're seeing increase at the moment, and all these amusing stories that are coming out into mainstream media as this gets leaked out, and people are scratching their head going like, I don't know what's going on. It's just so weird. Yeah, I don't know. People are just dying. There's no commonality here. We can't see any commonality that's going on. Yes, I'm sure we can all put 2 and 2 together here. Let's jump back over. Actually, I just want to touch on this one. No, let's jump back over to Russia. As I was saying before, we seem to see the war drums being beaten from NATO, the alliance pushing in tanks, and everyone's going, all right, let's do it. Let's go to war with Russia. So little Russia's going to get run over. Am I right? Who stands with Russia? Apparently North Korea does. North Korea's come out and has blasted the US tank decision for the Ukraine and vows to, quote, stand in same trench with Russia, which I found really, I mean, on one level, it kind of makes sense, but on another level, it's super odd. Like, why is North Korea so invested in this? What I'm reading from underneath this, or what's behind this sort of stuff, is North Korea taking the opportunity to have another stab at the US. There's the own issues that are going on there. This is one of the flashpoints that I've been talking about in the world, and I'll get to another one in a second. But this is certainly one of them, the Korean Peninsula, and I think this is going to increase in tension. But North Korea is starting to really push forcefully into the news cycle, into this space, and they're using the tactic that not everyone else is using, but they're using a very overtly aggressive messaging tactic at the moment. This is part of that. But very interesting, that language. We will stand in the same trench with Russia. So that would obviously pull US into another conflict if North Korea was starting to do more in that area, the Korean Peninsula. US would get involved. Just talk about China, Taiwan. US would get involved. US clearly involved in Ukraine. So we can see how that is being spread thin now. Tie that back into what I was saying with the US munitions situation being not good enough at the moment, and B, what I was saying about recruitment within Western armies, and that's been well catalogued, that the last couple of years, many Western military forces have missed their recruitment targets, the US being probably chief among them. And what we're seeing is a pretty bleak looking picture at the moment, where the US could quite easily be stretched far too thin to competently undertake all these various wars or battles going on, or I think we'll probably more likely would actually just have to go, no, we can't be involved in this one. Sorry, South Korea, you're on your own. I can't see that. Or sorry, Taiwan, you're on your own. I can't see that really being a feasible thing for them to do either. So interesting times ahead, I think. One more little flashpoint that I'm just going to add here. So I've just talked about 3 right there, and now I'll talk about a 4th. And there are a couple other smaller ones, but this is probably the larger one that is looming at the moment: Iran and Israel. So Iran has come under attack recently. There was an earthquake. So there was reports of an earthquake, which was kind of interesting, immediately followed by attacks. Maybe just coincidence. I just thought it was a very interesting coincidence. Iran had an earthquake and then boom, drone attacks, or they claim drone attacks coming out of Israel, attacked a military facility in one of their major cities. Then there was reports of many cities, many different targets being attacked within Iran. Then a bit of a lull in the news cycle. Not much after that. But, this is something that's increasing. So we've got another report here that experts are warning that Israel is preparing to go to war with Iran this summer. So this summer for them is mid-year this year, which is rapidly coming up. We're right at the end. We're 30th of January today. That's the first month done and dusted in the history books of 2023. So we're looking 4 months time, 5 months time. These two countries could be at it. It could be a lot quicker. One thing that would instigate this, if Iran clicks over and says, yep, we've got the nuke, or we're close to having the nuke, Israel will not stand for that. I can guarantee it. That will be one thing that would turn this into a war instantaneously. But they're already acting towards that as it is. So interesting times ahead. Let's get some good news, huh? In an unexpected swing. I'll let you. I don't want to sway your decision on this, whether you think this is good news or not. Unexpected swing. Germany's public now favors nuclear power. I don't know if you joined me for these months and months ago when the crisis was looming in Europe, the energy crisis. You could see it coming. It was 100% there. It was locked in, and everyone was ignoring it for some reason. People were still pushing forward with sanctions. People were still saying, no, we got to stop the Russians through this. And anyone who had half brain in the head was looking at what's going on in the situation going, you're all going to freeze. You're going to have a real bad problem with energy in the next couple of months. Well, that played out. One of the big things one of the news stories that I was always cottoned onto was European countries continuing to shut down their nuclear power plants, Germany being chief among them. France doing a little bit of backpedaling on it, but Germany just going, nah, we're shutting them down. We're shutting them down. Well, apparently the people now want power. They want their lights on, surprisingly enough. They want their fridges to work. They want the TV and the Netflix still running, and their social media to be turned on. So there's been a switch. There's been a shift. They're now moving towards favoring nuclear power. Might be a little too late. Horse could have already bolted. I'm not sure where they're at with it, but yeah, they've been for, I want to say, decades now, like really proactively shutting down this entire sector of their energy. But all of a sudden, you turn off one of your main sources of energy, being Russian gas, and you find that you need it. The energy crisis in Europe has changed the public opinion in Germany on nuclear power. The German Green Party and Social Democrats have long supported a move away from nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is seen as a preferable energy source to a fallback to burning coal. So I was looking up some statistics earlier this morning on production and consumption of energy in the world. I was more just interested, like I look up this stuff sometimes, and I was looking at what Australia produces. So where does Australia sit with natural gas? And I think we're like 15th, 13th or something, biggest producer of natural gas in the world. Oil, we're like 38th or something. We're pretty far down. But coal, we're right up there. I want to say we're 3, 4, somewhere around there. We're one of the world's biggest producer of coal. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting as a side note for any Aussies out there on where we sit with coal. Is nuclear energy more green than coal? I don't know how you don't make that argument. I don't know how people look at it and go, no, nuclear energy is bad. It's on the naughty list. It's no good. What we need is wind power and solar power, maybe some hydro. Again, I just like to say this. I think people are starting to figure this out. I do have another story on this somewhere. That the green revolution, it's not coming. It's not coming to save us. Where has that story gone? I've lost it. I've got way too many stories here. Yeah, this green revolution is just not going to work out, or if it is going to work out, it's not going to work out anytime soon. There was another story I was reading. I didn't snap a photo of it, but it was about Elon Musk basically coming out and saying that as well. Green's not there. Solar's not there. It's not going to be there for a number of years. It's going to take 10 years to get it up and running. So if we think we can just shut down fossil fuels now and everything will be okay, we're dead wrong. We're dead wrong. And I think people who are striving to do that are either ignorant of that fact or are malicious in their intent. So people just stop. Well, I get it. All right. You fed this narrative and it's like the world is doom and gloom. We're all going to die because we drive cars, blah, blah, blah. So they're like, we've got to stop the cars. How do we best do this? Let's throw a can of soup on a famous piece of art and then sticky tape ourselves to the wall. That'll do it. They want to stop the oil, right? Cool. I get that. What's the consequence of that? What actually happens? It doesn't matter because we're all going to die if we don't. Are we? Are we actually all going to die if we don't? Because if we do, a lot of people will die. That's for sure. Anyway, one way you can get out of this whole thing, nuclear energy. I'm not like a massive fan of nuclear energy. I just think of the options we have, it's possibly one of the better ones that we have access to right now. And we should be looking at it as at least a stopgap or an interim energy source until we sort our shit out. That's all I'm saying. All right. What else? I'll just end with this one. Firefighters continue to assess damage after large fire at Bosra Egg Farm. So an egg farm in the US of A. This is being reported by NBC Connecticut. So yeah, it destroyed a huge amount of this egg-laying facility. I don't know if you've heard the news. Eggs are in kind of short supply in the US. The prices are through the roof there for eggs, and New Zealand apparently too. Oh, thanks by the way, anyone, if you're listening to this and you sent me a message through about the shortage of eggs and hens not laying, because it was kind of like not on my radar. They've been laying in my area. I'd heard anecdotally some people say that they hadn't got some eggs, but I'd got eggs off other people. But yeah, quite a few people sent through stories of that, and I appreciate that there is a fair bit of evidence that a lot of chickens aren't laying eggs. Yes, some of them are from the US, and yes, it is winter there, and yes, hens do sometimes, well, a lot of the time, don't really lay eggs during the winter, or at least down-regulate the amount of eggs they're laying during winter. But a lot of those stories from Australia, we're not in winter. Remember, we're on the bottom of the earth, clinging with our toes, but it's hot here at the moment. We're facing the sun. So, what's going on? What's going on? Is it in the feed? Put a pin in that one, because I'm going to try and talk about that in a future SitRep. Animal feed. There's some issues definitely going on there. 100% problems with animal feed. Stony Creek Stumpy said, mine are laying in NZ. Good. Keep them laying, my friend. Keep them laying. And share the wealth. Give your friends some eggs. All right, that's it. I'm going to wrap it up there, because there's still a bunch of other stories, but it's probably enough doom and gloom for you today. As always, if you've got any questions, please feel free to shoot them through to me. I'll try and get another SitRep out done sometime this week, hopefully. We'll just see what happens, hey? But apart from that, I hope you're all well, healthy, training, being fit. Remember, I'll leave you with this thought. My number one advice for preparation, the first thing is mindset. Get your head right. Have a good mindset. Have a good psychological outlook on life. The number two thing is your physical ability or your capability. Get your body right. So do those things. I hope you're all getting out into the garden, working on the garden. My tomato plants are going crazy. They're not producing tomatoes yet, but they're getting quite big and too big. Like, I need to get in there and actually rip some of them out. Alpha, coming out of the US, just quickly said the producer of the Tractor Supply brand feed is putting a spiked protein in it to make them stop laying. Oh, that's not good. That's not good, my friend. So remember, chickens eat just about everything. They're not like pigs, but they eat a lot of stuff. You can feed chickens a lot of different things. If you're relying on solely store-bought food for your chickens, then I'd say branch out. Instead of chucking stuff in your compost, maybe just chuck it to the chickens. Get a dead animal, chuck it in there, let the flies get to it, maggots come out, chickens love it. So get on that. Alpha says it acts like an estrogen, apparently. That's what we need, more estrogen going into our systems. All right, gang, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining me. As always, I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate every single one of you. If you come across anything that you find interesting, please feel free to send it through to me. I'd love to read it, see what's going on in the world. Stay safe out there. Keep your eyes open. Stay prepared. Keep gardening. And until next time, Semper Paratus.